Alice.
Hello everyone. So very good to be here. Thank you for coming. It's hard to top that entrance, isn't it? They said I never would be able to, and they're quite right.
Well, we'll get to her in a minute. So here's your alter ego joining us for this.
Tiny Borg figurine.
Tiny version of her. A really complicated scene, and we have some really interesting footage later this afternoon where we'll actually get to see the breakdown of all the elements it took to create that scene. But first, Alice, welcome. Welcome to Star Trek Las Vegas. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Well, I had the opportunity to chat with you a few minutes ago backstage, and we were talking about your journey as an actor, the road to this fantastic career you've had. Tell me a little bit about the beginning of it. It was a little unconventional. You were mentioning that you didn't have a television when you were growing up.
I grew up in South Africa at a time when there wasn't television. I mean, South Africa didn't have television. It was a fairly kind of controlled regime, and it was getting more and more controlled at that time. And we didn't have television, and I think it was just a way of controlling what people consumed and what they saw. Anyway, it arrived the year I left. So I had never seen an episode of Star Trek when I went to audition for the Borg Queen. So I kind of had a bit of a black hole in relation to pop culture. But yeah, so
what made
I read. I'm a reader.
That's important. That's very important. What made you decide you wanted to go into the world of acting? I think you were studying psychology was your major before acting?
Yeah, I went to university to study psychology with the hope of becoming what my mother was, and it was of enormous interest to me, which is a clinical psychologist. And I guess if you think about it, you're actually exploring the same territory, but just from a different perspective, which is the human psyche and human beings in interaction with each other. And I had done plays at school, and I was absolutely in love with the idea of being a ballerina. I don't think I was ever technically good enough to be a ballerina. I was good at acting. I kind of acted my way through the shows. But my father didn't want me to dance. He said that it was a punishing existence and really very short. And he's quite right. I've got totally screwed up feet from years of dancing on point. But so he said, I really think you should pursue academic studies. So I went to university, but I had one free credit, and my parents, to their lasting disappointment, suggested that I take a year of drama, and that was kind of it, really. In my third year, I dropped psychology and English and decided to study drama. And my mother, bless her, paid for me to go to acting school in England after I finished at university. So that's an answer to your question.
We hear actors talk about the Royal Shakespeare Company a lot, and I think you were part of the RSC early on. Tell us about the significance of that, because we hear that, the RSC, and it's such an important stepping stone and a great moment for an actor to join the RSC. Tell us about that and your involvement.
I started with a film just by sheer grace and chance, and actually as a consequence of someone who was at acting school with me. The school that I went to had a teacher's course, a teacher's diploma, an actor's diploma, and a stage management diploma. And the final year stage management students did the shows for the third year actors. And so I became very friendly with one of the ladies who was in the stage management course, because we'd gone to a theatre in the north to do a production of Twelfth Night, and I had managed to create the most elaborate hairstyle for myself. It took me about 2 hours to do my hair. I don't know why, but I decided I needed my hair this way. So I would go into the theatre 2 hours early, and Samantha was there ironing the costumes, because she was doing stage management, ironing the ruffs and the cuffs and the great big dresses. And so we got to be very, very friendly. And we left college together. And about 3 months later, I got a call from the acting school, from Central, saying Samantha has submitted you for a film. She's working as an assistant to a casting director. So she wants you to send her your photograph, your 8 by 10. And that was for a film called Chariots of Fire.
We remember Chariots of Fire. With Ben Cross, who also was part of the Star Trek family in the 2009 JJ film.
And so that was the kindness of a friend that opened that particular door for me. And the film became an incredibly helpful springboard for me. I suppose I got quite a lot of work as a consequence of it. I got a film called Ghost Story, which is the first work I did in America. Thank you. Purely as a result of Chariots of Fire. It hadn't even been seen yet, but the casting director showed the director some footage, some scenes that had been cut together. So, because of Chariots of Fire, I pretty much think I was invited to play in the West End a wonderful Bernard Shaw play called Arms and the Man. And I won the Best Newcomers Award. And I think because of that I got invited to the RSC. So I was so new and I was so nervous. I was terrified going to the RSC. Shakespeare has to have been one of the greatest dramatists ever to have lived. The work, after years and years and years of studying it, is still amazing to me. You can take it on any level that works for you. And it is extraordinarily challenging to perform. So I was terrified, and I was working with great actors, people like Derek Jacobi, and Michael Gambon, and Pete Postlethwaite, and Malcolm Storey. Pete and Malcolm are not people you might have heard of, but they were great, great English actors. And wonderful company members. And so the company is divided into 2 streams, because there are 2 theatres. There's the main stage, and then there used to be a stage called The Other Place, which was literally a corrugated iron shack, and we all shared a dressing room. And we made our special, so if there was an army arriving, all the actors went outside and marched on the spot to create sound effects. I mean, it was rough, raw theatre, but that was the whole idea, was to have this very immediate, in-your-face theatre, and then the great big proscenium stage in the main house. And so the 2 streams would be working either in the main house or in The Other Place. And the thing about the RSC is that they are, for the most part, classical texts that one works on. And it is a wonderful training, because it really requires commitment to the language, and commitment to working as a group, commitment to the whole. So it's a very rigorous training. I mean, if you're not as terrified as I was, it's a great deal of fun. But it actually is very, very challenging. And I had wonderful roles in that first season. So it was an enormous privilege for a young actor to work with, to watch great actors working. The first play that I did with Derek was The Tempest. And I was playing Miranda, and he was playing, obviously, Prospero. And the first scene, if anyone knows the play, is a shipwreck. And Miranda sees it and is horrified, because I think she knows that her father has created the storm. And she runs onto the stage and with tears streaming down her face to tell him what she's seen. And he soothes her and he lulls her and he lays her to sleep. He sort of puts a spell on her. She falls asleep, and then down out of the gods comes Ariel, who is a fairy, an ethereal being. And Prospero gives Ariel a task to do. But it's a long, long speech of Prospero's. And I used to lie there every night. And it was amazing because I never heard the speech that Derek gave as Prospero sound the same 2 nights in a row. And what that meant to me as an actor was that he was in that moment every night. He wasn't saying the lines. He was discovering them every night afresh. And it's an enormous challenge to be able to do that. Just to bring us to Star Trek, when you've spent something like 2.5 years in a company, which I did at the RSC, the same group of people, an enormous degree of camaraderie develops, and you have to have faith in each other, and you have to make yourself totally vulnerable to each other. Because if you're doing a rep, you might go a repertory, if you're in a repertory company where you're doing 5 or 6 plays in succession, you might go 8 days without having performed a play, a particular one. You're performing something else at night in repertory, so you might be doing 3 or 4 plays a week. You're rehearsing something during the day, and then you come to a play that you haven't done for 8 days or 10 days, and you have a quick read-through before you go on, and then you walk onto the stage and you do it. And it's kind of like walking off the edge of a cliff. You've just got to throw yourself into it, and you've all got to be there to hold on to each other as you walk into a void. I mean, you know the play, but it's new every time. And that wonderful experience of being part of a really functional repertory company where people get on and they're really working with each other was what Star Trek was like. When I came into First Contact, it was the end of Next Gen, and they hadn't worked together for about 2 years, and they were so happy to be back together. But it was an incredibly playful atmosphere, and they were all so committed to making this work for Jonathan, because it was his first feature, that there was this wonderful atmosphere of playfulness, but a deep level of seriousness underneath it. And also, I was so moved by them, and particularly Brent, because he was still looking to push out the boundaries of Data. He'd been playing Data for years, but he was still interested in who he was as a being. He was still exploring, and that takes a very, very particular kind of commitment. And I found them amazing. And then, of course, you discover that there's the whole universe of the conventions, which is the extended family, so to speak. And it's very special, because I go from job to job, from country to country. I don't often work with the same people again, because that's just the way it works. So actually to come back and see everyone in the green room, and to come back and meet all of you it's a very special thing in a very kind of fluid, unstructured life.
Well, I do want to ask you about the, yes. I want to ask you about the casting process and making of the film, but in 1986 there was a mini-series on CBS, Dream West.
Yes.
Your director, Jonathan, was one of the actors. You were also in that mini-series, but you guys didn't get to work together back then, right?
No.
So your introduction basically to First Contact was through the casting agent at Paramount?
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about that. How do you find out about this character? How much information did they give you about the Borg Queen and what this whole universe is about.
I got 3 scenes from my agent and said, you will go in and do this. And I said, no way, there's no way I'm going to go in unless I get a script. And they said, no, you don't understand. No one gets a script. No one gets a Star Trek script. So you either go in and do it or you kiss it goodbye. So I thought, all right, I'll go and do it. And I had a friend who'd written some episodes for Star Trek. And I said, do you have any of these Borg episodes? And so he said, yeah, I've got them on cassette. So I watched them before I went in. And I learned the scenes, and I went in, and there was Rick Berman, Jonathan, and Julie Lowry, the casting director. And I did the 3 scenes, because if you think about it, the Borg Queen is really only in about 4 scenes. And as I was doing them, actually standing up and doing them, I began to realize how fascinating she is, how absolutely other she is. And I thought I had done an awful audition. So I said goodbye and thank you, and I ran off the Paramount lot. And I leapt into my car and I found the first payphone, because of course this was before we had mobile phones, right? I found the first payphone I could find at a gas station. And I called my agent and I said, I totally screwed that up. Please call them and tell them that I'd like to do it again, and I know I can do better. Anyway, we didn't hear from them for 3 weeks. And I thought, oh well, another one bites the dust. And then they called me and they said, well, will you come in and do it again? And I did do it again, and they offered it as I walked out of the door. So who knows what happened in those 3 weeks, but what happened for me was that I realized that I terribly badly wanted to play this character. And she was amazing. I don't like to refer to her in the past tense. I shall say she is amazing, because I don't think she's over yet.
Let's hope not. Once you find out the role is yours, obviously I think the next conversation is, what is this character going to look like? And the look was just amazing. I think Mike Westmore got an Academy Award nomination for the work on that film. So when do you first find out that this is a really complex setup and makeup hours and the suit and all those things? What happens next?
What happened next was that the day after they cast me, they all went off and started filming. And they all went to the Angeles National Forest to film those sequences that happened in the forest. And I was left on the lot with Brent. And Brent was really, really lovely. We spent a day together on the Paramount lot just talking about the characters. And he put me straight right away. I thought it was all about Picard and the Borg Queen, and he said, no. It's all about Picard and Data. I mean, it's all about the Borg Queen and Data. And of course he was right. You know, she's kind of been there, done that with Picard. She was interested in Data, because really, in him she meets her match. And so we talked a lot about that, and we obviously ran the scenes and worked on that. But who was immensely helpful to me was Scott Wheeler. And I know Michael Westmoreland got the award and the whatever, but
Todd Masters was also involved.
Todd Masters, but it was Scott Wheeler who really created the head and the face. He sculpted the little maquette. They always sculpt the head before they actually start to build it. And he showed me the head, and I had one request, which was he had sculpted in eyebrows, and I thought it made her look like Cruella de Vil. And I didn't want to be tied to a single expression. And I thought those eyebrows would just make her supercilious and I didn't want to go there. So the request was made to the powers that be at Paramount to take the eyebrows out of the maquette, and they did. And then he started building it, and we had numerous practice runs with it.
And probably makeup tests on camera and coming back and making changes? Or
I don't remember having that. I think we had one makeup test on camera. And Rick Berman thought my lips were too red. He said, take the lipstick off her. But I wasn't wearing lipstick. It was that my skin was made to be so pale that my lips looked very red. They were just my lips. But that was about it. What was interesting was that the initial designs for her had her in a dress. Yeah.
What kind of dress, Alice?
Well, it was just a frock, a black, dark frock with slits up the sides. It wasn't the suit that we all know and love. And I really don't know how we went from the dress to the suit, but the next thing I knew, they were doing a body cast. I went to Todd Master's workshop to have the body cast done, which is an interesting procedure as well. They lean you against a sort of stand, because you've got to be absolutely still while they wrap you in this jelly, which then sets, and then they cover you with plaster of Paris bandages, and they do the same for your head.
And how long are you in that, basically trapped? How long is that?
But not that long, 20 minutes. The bandages are warm. They soak them in, they're bandages impregnated with plaster of Paris, I guess, and they soak them in hot water, and then they wrap you. And it just takes as long as it takes to set. So we built the costume, but the costume, I mean, the head was incredible, because I certainly didn't feel like myself when I had it on. But the costume was very, very helpful, because something odd happened with the costume. And if you've heard me tell this story before, I'm sorry, but it is an answer to your question. The rubber did something it had never done before. It shrank. So the first day that I was in the suit was pretty intense, because my hands and feet swelled up so that when we stopped for a pee break, we couldn't get me back into the suit, because I didn't have any lines. All the lines on my knuckles had disappeared. My hands and feet had swollen so because of the circulation being cut off. So Todd realized he needed to make me a new suit. So he spent that weekend making a new suit. But because the suit was so tight, it kind of gave the character that walk that was like that, because I was just struggling to walk inside the rubber. But it really helped, because I started to feel like an animal after a while. And that was part of, all these different elements came together to just make up who she became in the end.
How were people reacting on set? I hear whenever the Borg Queen came on, there was kind of, the crew would quiet and everyone was just kind of staring to let you come in and have your moment. And did that inform the performance in any way, just kind of the respect people had for the Queen on set?
Well, I can remember walking to the craft service table. You know, they have a table where there's food and whatever. And I became aware that as I got there, everyone kind of drifted away. So I was alone at the craft service. So, yeah, you know, just being me, but anyway. So there was that kind that people did, without even realizing it, kind of give me a wide berth. But I spent most of the time, when I was not actually on set and the cameras were rolling, I was surrounded by what became known as the Borg Queen Wranglers. There was someone who looked after my lenses, there was someone who looked after my battery pack, there was someone with a glue brush and a pot of glue, just gluing me together if the costume split anywhere. There was someone who looked after my hands and feet, because they were separate to the costume. And there was obviously Scott for the makeup, and then there was someone with an enormous tube of KY jelly and a sponge, because that was what made her look so glossy. I was constantly being rubbed down with KY jelly. So I spent most of the time when I wasn't actually on the set surrounded by my Borg Wranglers, and they were great. They were all kind of Star Trek, zany, wacky types, but they were also artists in their own right. I mean, they were fine. They were painters or potters or sculptors. So it was a really, really interesting group of people.
How many days of filming for you on the movie? Do you remember how many you had to endure the Queen?
We worked, I think, 15 straight days. And I was working an 18-hour day because it took so long to put me together and then to take me apart. So eventually they moved me to a hotel right by the Paramount lot. So they literally just wheeled me off the lot in the morning and wheeled me back on 9 hours later. But it was an amazing experience. It was quite wonderful. I had an enormous amount of fun, but it was also, it was by the time we got towards 2/3 of the way through, it was just like I was waking and being the Borg Queen and sleeping and waking. I was just kind of floating in that dimension. It was a very interesting experience.
We have a really interesting video that shows all the layers for that.
Oh, this is interesting.
I think, Ben, if we have that, and by the way, Ben, we can't see the monitor here just has the TNG 30 graphic. It'd be great if we can see the video here so Alice can comment. Great, okay, now, whenever you're ready, Ben.
Oh, it's up there, isn't it?
It'll be up there, but I'm hoping we can see it here, because there it is, look at that. So you're on a crane. Your body is you're covered by the blue screen element as you're coming down. And that's the Todd Masters prosthetics piece that moved. So there you are behind that contraption.
This took a day of practicing to get right before we actually shot it.
Now you're in the full suit, so this is the second piece. Now they've removed your body and they've started to add the CGI tentacles. All this is motion control, so the camera can repeat the same movement over and over. So
it's actually amazing, isn't it?
It's incredible. And this is 1996, people, so.
Yeah.
This is where they start mapping it in the computer so that it can line up. The markers, the white on the blue screen element.
Weird little wobble. The
landing.
It took them weeks to get rid of that.
That's where the morphing comes in. They have to manipulate it frame by frame, I think, and then they morph from this piece to the full body shot of you in the suit.
Wow. Quite amazing.
What's going through your mind? I mean, are there technical things you have to keep track of here? Are there specific things they're telling you that you need to be doing, or is it just about the performance for you? That's pretty remarkable. Yeah, pretty amazing.
Well, I mean, the applause is for the CGI crew that accomplished that. It was.
But it wouldn't work without your performance, obviously. So you're there in that moment, creating the seed of it, you know.
Right. What happened was that I was more or less horizontal on a cradle, and then wrapped in the blue screen cloth. And Scott I had those little bits where the suit attaches. Apparently, to my body were actually little prosthetic skin pulls. So I had those on, and then the neck was glued to me and hanging down the front. But I just remember, so I was about 30 feet up in the air, and they brought me down with the crane and deposited me. But once one had figured that out, it was really just about the performance, well, just about saying the lines, really.
How many takes?
Oh, I have no memory of that at all.
That's probably a full day of work. It's not like you got it.
Yes, we rehearsed it for a whole day, and then we came and shot it the next day, or some subsequent days. But it really, I think, it was just the beginning of them using this level of CGI, and I think it was beautifully done on their part.
Did you have any moments as you're doing this on set where you're thinking, is this going to work? How am I going to look? Is this going to come together?
No, I didn't when we were doing it, but when I went to do, we of course had to replace all the dialogue because there was so much machinery on set that it all had to be replaced in the sound studio afterwards. And that weird little glitch as she drops into the body, everyone was saying this is going to be the greatest thing, you know, no one will have had an entrance like this ever before. And I was thinking, yeah. And then I came back again, and again there was this weird little thing as she drops in. And I didn't say anything, I just wondered if they were going to do anything about that. And apparently it took them weeks to solve that little wobble at the end. And then I saw it at the press night for the first time, and it was perfect. So I did have a moment when I wondered, is this really going to work?
But it did, and it's amazing. It's still one of the greatest moments in all the Star Trek films. If anyone, yes, absolutely. If anyone has questions for Alice, we have a mic over there. We're going to get to you in a minute here. I do wanted to ask you about revisiting the character for Voyager, for the finale, Endgame. Yes, Endgame. Did they call you and said, I know they had done the Borg Queen again, and I think you were out of the country working on another show, so when you finally got to do it again for Endgame, tell me about that, working with Kate and just stepping back into this character. I think it had been 3 or 4 years.
I was really nervous. I didn't know how she would translate to a small screen, having first discovered her on an enormous cinema screen. So that, I was very nervous about that. And then suddenly, the night before, it suddenly dawned on me that, you would have thought I'd realised this before, but I didn't, that in the feature, it was the Borg Queen and 2 guys. And in the television, it was going to be Seven of Nine and Kate. And I thought, oh my goodness, it's 3 women. What's going to happen? Now, all that sort of weird sexual stuff, what am I going to do about that? And I spoke to the producer and he said, don't worry about it. Just think of her as omnisexual. And I thought, omnisexual? Yeah, I can do that. so we actually had an enormous amount of fun on
Voyager.
On Voyager. It was very fast. It was 2 days, and I was going back to England to do something else. So it was, I literally flew in. They knew that the costume would fit me, and they had to wrap me by 5 o'clock the next morning because I was on a flight that afternoon. So we did another, all-nighter. But they're 2 very special ladies to have worked with. And it was great. And what was really lovely was that a lot of the crew were the crew who'd shot First Contact. And whoever hadn't been on First Contact, but was on the lot and came by to say hello. So it was this really lovely revisiting of that.
The family.
Yeah.
Great. Well, let's go to Q&A because we have some fans over here. Good afternoon. How are you?
Good, thank you. I have a question. Thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate you. And I wrote it down because I keep forgetting. You've worked with Brent, you've worked with Jerry, you've worked with, of course, Patrick, and you've worked with, you work with Kate. And when you contrast those folks to work with, who's your favorite? I mean, any funny stories, anything you can tell us? Because I know working with Brent and Patrick could be a very interesting trip, as well as Jerry and Kate.
Favorites are, that's just not a possible question. They're each of them totally different. They're each of them wonderful actors. So there's a richness and an exchange that's unique to the individual. Funny stories, I actually don't remember any from Voyager. We were working so fast and it was so intense because it was literally essentially a day and a half. But something that I remember so vividly from First Contact was that I would walk onto set and Jonathan and Brent and Patrick would tease each other mercilessly. It was like this constant stand-up comedy show. They were so funny together, and they were playing off of each other. And Jonathan would say, "Roll cameras," and they'd still be fooling around. And I was like, "Oh my goodness!" And Jonathan would say, "Action," and it was like someone had just turned the sharp focus switch, and they were totally there and in the moment. And I was amazed, because they did that at the RSC as well. They would be sitting in the green room playing poker, and they would hear their cue, and they would run from the green room to the wings. Now, I can't do that. That's just not my personality. I kind of have to be in the moment. But no, these guys were like, they were just dancing on their feet. Quite amazing.
Thank you.
Full of admiration for that capacity.
Great. Thank you so much for your question. And how are you?
Hi, thank you for being here. My question is actually about the word Trek itself, because since you're from South Africa, you're probably familiar with Trek as an Afrikaans word.
Yeah.
And the original Trekkers, I think, were like 19th century oxen drivers driving oxen across the veld, as in Jock of the Veld, the book. So I was just wondering if it ever struck you as interesting to have what in a way is a very old term being used in such a futuristic setting, or any other comments about, the language, the Afrikaans language itself?
The word trek, I mean, it's really, really appropriate for a journey across dimensions and across universes, because really the voortrekkers, which is the Afrikaans word, which would be the front runners, were really the same as the settlers who rode the wagons across America. The same degree of courage and spirit of adventure and opening up of frontiers. So I actually think the word trek is totally appropriate. And as for the Afrikaans language, it's derived really from Flemish and Dutch. And when some people speak it, it sounds horrible. But the poetry can sound very lovely.
Do you speak it yourself? Or?
I grew up speaking English at home, but I was born into an Afrikaans community in the Kalahari Desert. But you really have to speak a language to keep it going. So I used to be absolutely fluent, but I am no longer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we are winding down, so let's see if we can get to one more.
Hi, I'm curious why the Borg Queen's dialect was not your own, and is there someone upon whom you based the dialect you used?
How do you mean the dialect?
She sounds American to me.
Yes, I was asked to be American.
Or
Yeah. So
just have that already trained in you, or did you base it on someone? It's such an iconic voice dialect when you speak. It almost reminds me of someone when I hear it, but I don't know whom.
I don't know. That was just her voice. Usually characters develop their own voice. But that was my version of American at that point in time. It's gotten slightly better since then. That was, yeah.
It's fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alice, this has been so much fun. Fantastic. Thank you for being here. A warm
Chariots of Fire, I spent the movie in a daze of love because I met my husband on that movie. So this song kind of always gets my heart beating.